fix myself before I start sitting into these videos. I'm sure I look like a bit of a schlub, but maybe that's because I am a schlub. A little late getting on here tonight, doing some cooking because tomorrow is Taco Tuesday, and I thought it'd be fun to do something taco-wise for some of that tomorrow. Anyway, so world building for sentinels. I think I wanted to step away from the Merc Riders for tonight because I was playing with that a little bit more, and like it feels like that one's designing two worlds, the before and after. The after, I pretty much got figured out what I want it to be. I have the tone I want it to set, and I have the feeling I want to go through with the story with. But some of the details are contingent on, as I build the Merc Riders setting, the after the apocalypse portion of that story is contingent on the framework that you build for the prior to the apocalypse setting. And yet it's sort of like when I talk with some of my friends about the future, talking about AI development and technological advances, 3D printing, and those types of things, one of the things we talk about periodically is the singularity. And the singularity is a point at which the rapid advancement in tech. So singularity means sort of like a black hole. There's a point past which the density of a black hole exceeds your ability to perceive anything beyond it. No light can escape. So you have this, you hit the point of the singularity where everything gets this pinch point, and it's sort of like that point of no return. And so with the idea of future, looking at the future and technological advances and things like that, there is a point called the singularity, which we can't see past. It's a point in our future where things change so rapidly that we cannot fathom how much different it will be past that point. And I feel like there's an equivalent in the Merc Riders setting that I'm building, which is a post-apocalyptic sort of fantasy setting. And it's sort of like you will get a point where things have become so bad you cannot imagine it from the perspective of before it went bad. And so I'm sort of having to do both sides of that equation. The post-apocalyptic setting that you build and the pre-apocalyptic setting that you build feel in a lot of ways like very different universes. They're wholly different. They're completely different from one another. In this setting, you may have something as simple as like the Eberron style setting, where you have big cities with newspapers and a sort of noir kind of feel to them and things going on in them. And then you have this apocalypse that happens. The change from that view into these sort of walled-in fortresses to protect yourself from a mad, destructive world, eating at anything that steps outside the bounds. And inside that city is the power structure of people desperate for any last vestiges of their capability to be powerful or to have any kind of sense of achieving anything with their lives. They're going to do it in a way that, you know, climbs up the ladder and gets them some modicum of achievement in a world where achievement is sort of like doesn't happen anymore. The world's dying at that point in this setting. And so just having to build that sort of world. But then where did that world belong before the apocalypse? There will be some portions of it that are informed by some of the aspects of the setting. But it is still like, I think when I was talking about it last night, I mentioned like, I want to maybe have like an X-Files sort of setting, or a, what was the other one? Ash and the Evil Dead sort of setting that you could have in a fantasy, sort of modern fantasy. And I was feeling like there is a sort of a time frame that's workable for that, and I think I'm probably going to move that towards a combination of the Roman Empire time frame and a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean, believe it or not, as stupid as that sounds. But having that sort of mix of flavors with a little bit of, as weird as it sounds, could you put in a little bit of Stranger Things into that setting and just kind of mix them together in that mix, pull out a sort of that parts that cohesively stick together into a recognizable thing with that classic Tolkien, or even maybe even Norse or Greco-Roman mythology for your races of fantasy races that you can play as a tabletop game, but with its own spin. It's not going to be D&D specific. And then you have all that together in a setting that is cohesive and works well enough together. And then you have to end that world and then put some of those pieces together again in the new arrangement that makes the post-apocalyptic setting. So it's a bit of a workload to make it all work together. And I think I mentioned before, the concept behind the settings each have a sort of a dark flavor. The Empyrean realm has its darkness to it, which is the overarching storyline above. But the individual settings that plug and play into it. So you have the Empyrean realm with the sockets that you can plug in other settings around it. I have the 3 other settings that I've sort of built out at this point. And we have the Merc Riders, which is the post-apocalyptic setting. And like I said, I need to work on that one because it's almost like building 2 settings. And then we have the Serpent's Children, which is where all the characters are different varieties of Medusa in a parthenogenically producing population where there are no men. And that one, it's a great story idea. It's a great setting. It's a sort of a neat gimmick, but it doesn't have as fully fleshed out a concept of the story arc and where it's going as the other 2 settings. And then the 3rd setting is Sentinels. And that one's the most fleshed out of the actual story arc that I want to conduct when playing it with others as a game. And it's fleshed out enough that I can write stories in it, just for the fun of writing a story in it. I feel like I could probably write something in each of them distinctly. But for gameplay and story writing for others, if I want to, and I want to definitely open these settings up for other people to play in and create stories and do all sorts of other things. Fan art, story writing, make music for a character in the setting, or just like play in the world with the rest of us. And I want to open it up for people to freely be able to do that. And in order to get to that point, I think I need to flesh out some aspects of it a little bit better than it's currently fleshed out. I could write stuff in it because, much like the short-sightedness that can happen when I edit my own stories, I can be looking at a part and go, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But that's because I understand it in my head before it even goes on the page. There are parts in here that I understand and I'm adding to what I'm reading unconsciously that somebody else doesn't necessarily see. And that's a barrier to playability. It's a barrier to people being able to write. Now, if I make this open for people to be able to write fan fiction or even write novels in the setting that they can sell or share or whatever they want to do, I'm not necessarily going to hold the writer or the fan to my storylines. Like, if you do fan fiction for Star Wars, the first 3 Star Wars movies, if you end up deciding that instead of doing this now, what I'm going to do is do this part a little bit differently, or say you were watching the original trilogy and then you saw the first episode of the prequels and you wrote stories about where it went from there, when the second and third of the prequels came out, they don't have to acknowledge your storyline for where you went. And I want to be able to do the same thing. I want people to be able to sit down and go like, oh yeah, I want to write this story about this harpy who lives in the Empyrean realm and her experience of being one of those fabled mythic beings that has been somehow brought into the lives of the people living in that realm. You can totally do that. And when I release other stuff in the future, or if there's other stuff I currently have planned for that setting that contradicts that, I'm not going to say like, no, that's not how it works. You can't write that until I've told you how things actually will work in that setting. Now, I don't want to do that. I want people to be able to create anything they want in that setting. And sometimes that's going to involve some people creating some maybe unsavory or I don't want to say unsavory, but stuff that I wouldn't produce for my settings. I mean, I'm not going to tell people they can't. I'm not going to be a stickler about it. But at any rate, of all the settings that I have going, the Empyrean Realm is one of the more fleshed out ones. But right now I'm trying to focus a little bit more on the other settings I've got as subsettings. And one of them is the world of Urt, aka the Sentinels setting. And the Sentinels in this sense are what I'm going to call superheroes in a, I wouldn't say Eberron. I might say Forgotten Realms kind of city. Like the big, like Waterdeep, or some of those other settings that are major cities. They're sort of like the Babylon meets Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings. They're modern cities done up as, you know, there's a little neighborhood or a little section of the major city that we start in that has the equivalent of a Hell's Kitchen in it, and Hell's Kitchen will have their protector in it, and their protector is a hero who had I still call it inflicted powers. It's sort of the Spider-Man, Daredevil, to a certain degree some of the Flash from DC. Those are inflicted powers. And I have the other classes, the alien visitor, in this case, the elves and selkies and those types of things that show up in the city, or maybe they show up outside of the city, being raised by humans as sort of changelings, and uncovering their mysterious origins as the last of their kind. I feel like it's doable and it's fun to explore the idea of that sort of where would the changelings come from? Like, how do you build your world in such a way that it's only humans, except for the last few saved beings from another reality? It's not quite another reality, and I don't know that I want to do that. So one of the things I was looking at was my Empyrean realm characters include some of these races that might have sent one of their children down. But none of them are facing an apocalypse where this is the last, son of whatever. So I don't know that I can have that sort of elves from the Empyrean realm send their son to the world of Ort to be the last survivor of their kind, and his mystical elvish tendencies separate him from the other beings, and he uses those powers or talents to save people, be a hero of some kind. I don't know. I mean, that sounds really great. Every part of that sounds good, except for the fact that the Empyrean realm isn't running out of dwarves, isn't running out of elves. They're not dying out. You can't be the last son of the Empyrean realm. Well, it's not entirely true. Part of one of the things I sort of set up as one of the mechanics for the Empyrean realm conflict is a war that's happening between sides that threatens to destroy all of the godly beings that live up there. So there is the possibility that they send their child away to be saved. One of the other tricks I have going on for that particular category is there are other beings who are sort of like key beings who come from the Empyrean realm. And they're the first mothers who were destroyed in the Empyrean realm and are then sort of cast into the subrealms to be raised unknowing of who they are, other than the fact that they are different from everyone else. But that they're not player characters. They're not meant to be player characters. Something to think about. The inhuman aspects are the ones that have the more distinctive elements. They're more of the elementals, demons, and they're children of entities from another realm. So the Dhampir and which is a half or part vampire, part human. The shifters, who are part human, part were. So like a werepanther or a werewolf. The Genasi, who are part genie or elemental in this case. And then the part demon, part angel entities. And that's mostly straightforward. The biggest trick with that is, where are the vampires and wares coming from? Because I don't really have a lot of space where that happens in the Empyrean realm. I do have wares. So the Antherian and the Therianthropy. Latin's a fun language. It is, boys and girls. Antherians are animals that can assume a partly human shape. So you would have a wolf that could take on that classic wolfman look, but never really fully cross over. And some myths do allow them to cross over into becoming human in appearance. But the reverse is a human who has become, who can become partially animalistic all the way down to assuming an animal form. And so I've sort of put them both in the same crowd and called them just the weres in general. A werehuman and a werewolf and whatever. So they exist in the Empyrean realm. So the shifters do have an equivalent in the Empyrean realm. The Genasi also have an equivalent. The half elementals or part elementals have the train is going by all the down by the river. The elementals do have their equivalent in the mythic population among the Empyrean realm. I think the only one we really don't have that marker for is vampires. And that maybe that's something I have to play with a little bit I'm not really sure how I feel about that one. I could make room for it, but I don't know if that's the right choice. And so I'm not sure how much I like that being in there. But it fits the setting of Sentinels really well. To have a half vampire. To have a half shapeshift, half were creature. Half elemental. Part demon or a part angel, essentially. The mutants, I'm looking at the ones I chose here before and saying this falls in the category of some of the limitations I wanted to put in each of the subsettings. Part of what I was doing at one point was I wanted each of these subsettings to feel like a self-contained world. And then the Empyrean realm is sort of this mythical place outside of that realm that contains wonders and horrors that are so distinctly different because they don't exist in your world. So when I had originally built it, I was just trying to build out like, okay, so what kind of mutants can I create that would have their own distinctive powers? So I was thinking something like a harpy might have a harpy's screech, or a something along the lines of a siren song. So sort of like hypnotic or damaging vocal attack. A doppelganger would be a shapeshifter. A troll would be regenerative. It'd be like a Wolverine or a Deadpool. And a dragonborn would have the ability to project an energy attack, like a fire breath or something like that, by breathing out, and have their scaly hide and their mutant form. And those all really sort of like, I can envision them being X-Men characters. But by the same token, almost all of those exist in the Empyrean realm. And I don't really want that overlap to be as clear or obvious. My ears are still bugging me from this cold. So I may change up those races a little bit differently. The enchanted tools I really have a sense of the things I want them to have. So I may be reworking a fair amount of this different type of ability, what different classes of hero for the setting. But the overarching feel of the setting should be the players arrive in the setting as teenagers who can remember living their life with awe and wonder about the heroes that are around them, and fear and anxiety about the monsters that live among or live on the edges of society and are raiding or infiltrating their civilization. I want them to feel that world. I want them to feel like they're participating in that world and have a sense of some of the history of it. And then I want to throw them in the midst of waking from adolescence into their roles as different types of heroes in this setting. And the thing about a gameplay or even a reader reading a short story is they're almost always going to be going on some kind of heroic path. In a written work, you have like the hero's journey, the call to adventure, the refusal of the adventure, the crossing of the first threshold, the confrontation or the mentor, and those kinds of things. That hero's journey, that's not the life of the dirt farmer in the village you came from. And I've made this comment a few times to people in the futurist community that I talk with, is we talk about, do we live in a cyberpunk society right now? And I'm like, yeah, we kind of do. But people say like, yeah, but my life isn't like the characters in a cyberpunk story. I'm like, no, they're not. You're the person who's stocking the shelf that the cyberpunk hero passes on his way through a store trying to avoid the street samurai that's going to kill him. Like, you're not the hero. You're an NPC. You're one of those shopkeepers in The Legend of Zelda that sells him potions. Your life is just the mundane life of a simple human being. You're not the hero. That's why the world doesn't feel cyberpunk, except for all the elements that say it is cyberpunk. And by the same token, these characters that you're playing or reading about, when I build this setting, if I write a story in this setting, or if you play a character in this setting, those characters are not the person stocking the shelf in the grocery store. They're not the guy who pumps your gas at the gas station. They're not, I mean, I think there are only 2 states where that still happens. You pump your own now, right? But you're not the hero in most cases in those settings. But if you're reading about the hero. If you're playing a game, you play as the hero. In a video game, you're a hero character. When you play Dungeons and Dragons, you're not designing an NPC. You're designing a hero. And so that sort of usual life isn't an option for you. So default, all of these characters have the option of becoming one of these types of heroes. Now, I set it up originally so that there were the 5 different types of heroes that you could be. I'm debating whether or not I want to give somebody the option of like 1, maybe 2 players the option of buying a different path. So here's the thing. In a setting like this, you have superheroes in a city, protectors of the innocent, whatever, mahoozy doozy, whatever. But some of those heroes are characters like Batman What is Batman's power? Well, most of Batman's power is money and technology. So the closest equivalent you're going to get in a fantasy setting is a young prince. And believe it or not, this is going to sound stupid. The closest fictional version of something like that we have outside of a Batman in a modernish setting is He-Man. A young prince who seems like just a very muscle-bound, well-dressed, and slightly posh-seeming prince who is secretly the master of the universe, a muscle-bound barbarian sword-wielding hero. And nobody knows his secret identity. It's stupid that nobody would know that. But I want to maybe make that option available for a player to be a He-Man defender of the innocent with a secret identity and being a rich, wealthy prince or something during the daytime. But there's also the other end of that spectrum where you have a person who has mastered some mystical arts, and that's where they get their power from. They're an ordinary human, but through study and practice and exploring secrets, have gained a set of skills that grant them powers they can use to help others. So I kind of want to do the option for both of those to be there too. So I got to figure out how I'm going to fit that in. And I want them to have the option to be sort of stuck in the superhero mode where they play within the superhero realm as superheroes doing superhero things and can forget where they came from in the Empyrean realm if they so choose. But I also want them to be able to say, like, oh no, I'm also here trying to find a way back. So they have that choice of whether or not they're pursuing that aggressively or not. So I got to figure that one out. I think I'm probably going to call it here soon for tonight. I've got a few things I'm going to try to do over the next few days. We'll see how that works out. But we're about a half hour. We're over a half an hour in. That's not bad. It's not the hour that I've been doing sometimes recently. But I appreciate you joining me. Excuse me. I appreciate you joining me. And I will hopefully catch up with you at a decent time tomorrow. Not quite as late as I've been doing, but take care. And good night. Hope you're doing well. Hope you don't have anything infectious. I should say that some other way, shouldn't I? Hope you don't have the plague. I gotta find a better way to close out the night without these little aside comments. Stay safe, stay sanitary. Talk to you later.